Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and this is Silicon Dojo. Silicon Dojo, authorityless, gatekeeperless, free to the end user, hands-on technology education here in Asheville, North Carolina that empowers our students to do whatever the hell it is that they want to do. So this video that you're watching, obviously this isn't actually hands-on, but what happens is I run these classes here at Silicon Dojo in Asheville, North Carolina. We have students, we have lab computers, the whole 9 yards, and basically what I'm doing with these videos that are going to YouTube or whatever other video platform is I'm simply just recording the same class that we had, and you can follow along at home. Now, one of the big overarching concepts with Silicon Dojo is that we have a train the trainer program. What this means is that when we create education and when we present education, we are not simply trying to teach students the material that we're going over for the day, but we're trying to give them the ability to train other folks. So we have material, we have our workbooks, we have this video, obviously you can follow along, and I want you to know you can take any of this, you can use it as is or modify it as you see fit, and you can provide the same type of technology education into whatever environment that you're in. If you would like to teach people in your workplace about something like ChatGPT, if you would like to teach a Boy Scout group or a 4-H group, a group, a kids group at temple or a kids group at church, please feel free to take this material and actually teach people within your physical environment. Now, we are free to the end user. I will say that's not actually free. Things cost a lot of money. Rent costs money, headsets cost money, cameras cost money, computers cost money, seats. Do you know how much a chair costs? Do you know how much a 10 chairs cost? Anyways, the important thing is with Silicon Dojo, what we're trying to do is we're trying to abstract out the financial component of education from the actual education. And so essentially what we're trying to do here is find a way to fund education where it's not necessarily the students having to foot the bill all of the time. What you find out in the real world is the people that are most able to pay for education are the people that least need education. It's kind of funny, right? When I was eating ramen noodles and barely getting by, I had to spend, $3,000 to $10,000 on tech boot camps. Now that I'm doing quite fine, I just go to Google and research whatever it is that I need, right? It's one of those weird things in the modern world of education. The people that are most able to pay for education are the ones that least need it. And again, the people that most need it are many times least able to pay for it. So we're trying to separate that financial from the actual educational component. So one of the things that we're doing is we are crowdfunding at this point in time. There should be a donor box link down below or somewhere around this video. If you find these videos and this education valuable, if you find what I'm doing valuable, and you're able to throw some money into the pot every month, that would be absolutely lovely. We work for tips. Quite literally. We work for tips. So if you want this type of a program to continue, please throw some money into the pot. So a tiny second of advertising for something that we're doing here at Silicon Dojo in Asheville, North Carolina, is we are actually starting Fireside chats here. One of the big problems with new people trying to get in the technology industry is they go out, they go to boot camps, they get certifications, they get degrees, but they don't really understand how the tech industry works. Who you talk to, how you solve problems, how do you build a company, how do you build a startup, how does funding work, all of those kind of brass tack issues that frankly you don't get when you go to a boot camp program or anything like that. So we're starting a Fireside chat series here, and basically the idea is we are going to bring in real technology professionals, we're going to bring in real founders, real entrepreneurs, people who run things like ISPs, MSPs, SPs, the whole 9 yards. And we're going to sit down for anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes, and we are actually going to have a conversation with them to better understand how they're able to provide the services that they provide, right? Our first fireside chat is going to be here May 9th. It's a Tuesday. It's going to run probably from about 6 to 8 p.m. Basically, we're going to sit down. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do a relaxed interview with John Jones, the CEO and co-founder of Anthroware, which is a software development company here in Asheville, North Carolina. Once we get done with that kind of relaxed interview, then we're going to open it up to the audience. So people in the audience are going to be able to ask questions. So if you are interested in learning, again, not TCP/IP, not the specific programming language, the specific function. If you're trying to understand how you offer deliverables to end users and actually provide those deliverables, think about coming to these fireside chats. I'm hoping that this is going to be a monthly program. You can just go to our meetup group, Silicon Dojo, on meetup.com. You can RSVP for this and come on down. We are going to try to record this because I know that's going to be the question. Are you going to record it and put it to YouTube? We're going to try. We're going to try. Have I told you what a pain in the ass audio is to deal with? So I'm going to have video cameras there. It will get recorded. Whether or not the quality of the production is good enough to put to YouTube, well, we'll find out on May 10th. So anyways, if you're interested in this, please come and actually participate. I think this is going to be an awesome thing. Before we jump into this class, I would like to give a bit of a personal note before I do this video as it relates to my life within about the past week. This is my actual lived experience. So my wife actually had to have major surgery on Monday. I'm filming this on Thursday, and we did the class on Tuesday. And oh my golly, the recovery process sucks. Before she had the surgery, the doctor was like, yeah, she's not going to be able to do any exercise for 2 weeks. And you're like, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. As I'm taking my wife from the hospital, they're like, oh yeah, basically we don't want her to leave the house. When we say exercise, we mean walking down the sidewalk is too much effort. It might push her blood pressure up, and that might cause some problems. So your wife gets to be stuck in the house for 2 weeks, and the whole healing process, minimum, is going to be 6 weeks. And then it's gonna go on past that. And basically, when I did this class, this surgery that she had to undergo, we knew that she had to undergo it, but we thought it was going to be in the middle of summer. A couple of people canceled their surgeries, so she was available to have the surgery before she was normally supposed to. So again, she had it on Monday. And the interesting thing was all of my plans got thrown into disarray. So I was creating this ChatGPT class. I was doing many other things. And all of a sudden, right, my wife has to go into surgery a day and a half before I'm actually going to be doing this ChatGPT class and a whole bunch of other stuff. It became a disaster. Basically, while she's in surgery, I'm sitting there tippy-tap typing up the frickin' workbook so that my students are able to actually go through the class. I come to teach the class. We go through the whole class. It runs till like 10 o'clock at night. Because my wife can't do a lot of things, I then end up continuing to work till after midnight. I had to go to the grocery store to pick up ice for her because of her injuries. It's just been an absolute hell of a thing, right? It's just, wow. And I'm not looking for sympathy here. I really, honestly, if you've ever followed me for any length of time, you know I really don't give a crap about sympathy. Why I'm bringing this up, though, as a lived experience example for you, is I've noticed for a lot of people nowadays, when they talk about bosses, when they talk about owners, when they talk about teachers, when they talk about people in authority, there's this idea almost that folks in authority should almost be superhuman, right? I see this with like bosses a lot of the times. The 50 things a boss needs to do to be a good boss. And I look at that list and I go, wow, that's exhausting. I guess I will never be a good boss because that seems exhausting, right? One of the big issues we have in the modern world is a lot of times we do not realize that the people that we're interacting with have more going on out of the frame that we see than we realize, right? When you go to your boss, when you go to your professor, not only are they interacting with you and dealing with whatever else, not only are they interacting with their managers and their bosses and their stakeholders, but their kids may be drug addicts. Their spouse may have just died. They may have just found out that they have cancer. And so when you're sitting there complaining or doing whatever else, realize what's going on in that authority figure's mind might be right, not necessarily hyper focused on whatever issue you think is the priority. I think about this with one of my viewers when I was doing the live streams, and I actually had a computer science student that was in Syria during the Civil War. Is it during? I think the Civil War is still going on. Anyways, things keep going for so long, we forget of whether or not they've stopped. But the interesting thing was that he was sitting there and he was complaining about his professors. Eli, my professors are so bad at my university. What do I do? And so I told him, the first thing that you do is you go in and you thank your professor. Your professor is trying to teach you quite literally during a civil war. I don't care how bad they are. Put an apple on the desk and say thank you very much. And then beyond that, if that's not good enough for you, obviously you want more, think about what you can create. Think about how you can add value. If the professor is not teaching you everything that you feel that they should be teaching, how can you learn the material and start creating a tutoring group, right? Again, with Silicon Dojo, we're about to start doing fireside chats. If your educational facility is not providing everything that you need, think about creating your own fireside chats or your own Silicon Dojo, or what else you can add to the environment that's not necessarily putting additional burdens onto your authority figures who may honestly already be struggling with a hell of a lot of stress and things that you don't see. So I'm just going to put this out there. I know a lot of people when I say this, especially in the modern world, as soon as they say, oh, your boss has personal issues, they start saying, well, I have personal issues too. And again, to be clear, I think everybody should be nicer to each other. I think about this in Thailand. I traveled through Thailand a couple of times, and I was talking to somebody about the Thai language. And when two Thai people meet each other, they either say swati ka or swati cup. One's for the men, one's for the females. Anyways, I was sitting there and I was talking to a Thai, and I was like, oh, so swati ka, swati cup, that's like hello. And the interesting thing is, he sat back, I was like, no, it's not hello. It is a greeting, it's not hello. It's more like yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And I always thought this to be an interesting concept, right? In the Western world, we're very hierarchical, right? You have the subjugated and the subjugator. You have the authority figure and the lesser, the master and the slave, right? One of the things just to think about in this modern world is, what if we think about the world of more swati ka, swati cup? What if both sides said yes, sir? What if both sides looked up to the other side as the person to give deference to, and we all, try to be a little nicer to each other? Just one of those things to be thinking about. Because, surgeries are so much fun. Now, before we jump into this ChatGPT class, let me talk about our lab environment for a second. So here at Silicon Dojo in Asheville, North Carolina, our lab computers are 2012 MacBook Pros with Ubuntu installed onto them. And I find these to be absolutely terrific lab computers. So if you're dealing with server operating systems and such, they actually have a network card, a hardwired network card already built into them. We we install Ubuntu onto these MacBook Pros. Ubuntu by default has the proper drivers for the webcam on the 2012 versions, not necessarily the same with the different versions out there. And so basically these 2012 MacBook Pros are just really great lab computers so that folks can come in and they can do these projects and everybody is on the same type of system. We also install SanDisk drives into them to make them a little bit faster. But this is a very important thing to be thinking about if you're going to be following along with these classes in your environment, or you're thinking about creating your own Silicon Dojo. My buzzword for the next decade is I barely get paid to train you folks. I sure as hell don't get paid to troubleshoot your issues. One of the things that I see, especially when we're doing these coding projects, when we're dealing with APIs and other things, is that different operating systems basically deal with stuff differently. And the issue is if you have 10 students with 10 entirely different computers, it is going to be a disaster from a troubleshooting scenario. One of the things, so again, we use Ubuntu in all of our systems, and Ubuntu works like a champ. But pip isn't installed by default onto Ubuntu. For some reason. Tkinter is not installed by default on Ubuntu. So if you're dealing with an Ubuntu system, you got to make sure you install pip before you install the other Python packages. You have to install Tkinter on its own, and it's got its own little quirks. The issue is if you go over to Mac, right? So I've been using a 2018 MacBook Pro until a couple of days ago, actually. And the interesting thing with that is if you wanted to use Tkinter, if you installed VS Code, VS Code's default interpreter was like Python 3.08 when the current Python is 3.10. So if you run Python scripts from the terminal on an Intel MacBook Pro, it works fine. If you did it just with a default configuration from VS Code, it would fail until you went in and you cleared the interpreter, and then that would solve the problem, which was its own thing. And then I just got an ARM. I just got an M2 MacBook Pro. I love that thing. Again, realize my day-to-day computer is an M2 MacBook Pro. Our lab computers are 2012 MacBook Pros. Use the computer that solves your particular problems. Anyways, I got this thing up and running a couple of days ago, and it has its own quirks, right? Every computer, every operating system has its own quirks, has its own issues. So one of the things that I would say is if you're going to be learning technology, get a lab computer and use that lab computer for your learning, for your training, so that you have a good standard configuration and you're not failing because you're troubleshooting, right? When your code fails, is it failing because you screwed up the code? Is it failing because you misunderstand Linux or the operating system permissions? Is it failing because you installed a security sweep that thinks your code is a virus and so it's shutting it down? Right? I want my students to know they screwed up the code. If it failed, it's because they screwed up the code. They're not going to have to go and try to do troubleshooting. And again, I sure as hell don't want to do any troubleshooting. So, prices for MacBook Pros, we use Back Market, literally about 15 of these things off of Back Market. So yeah, we use it. They're not an affiliate or anything of us. The price for these 2012 MacBook Pros fluctuate. Currently, today, it's $135. So it's generally between $135 to $150. You throw a solid state drive in there, and it works great. The standard configuration comes with 4 gigs of RAM. For us, that's worked fine so far. I honestly, for our projects, haven't had an issue with 4 gigs of RAM, but you can upgrade it to 16 gigs of RAM, though that'll probably cost you about another $50. So depending on what you're looking for, you'll be able to get one of these lab computers, all up and running for probably between $160 to $230. But definitely get a lab computer and just use that for your projects. Now, the final bookkeeping before we jump into this ChatGPT class is make sure to print out the workbook on paper so that you can scribble, you can make notes, you can follow along with what I'm trying to teach in this class. I know in the modern world, everybody wants everything to be digital, but frankly, sometimes dead trees are actually very useful. Whenever you come to a class here, actually print out a copy of this for every single student here so that they can follow along and they can create their notes and all of that as we're doing the class. So when you see me pick up this wad of paper, this workbook is what I'm looking at. The link for it should be somewhere around this particular video. You can go to silicondojo.com, find the information for this particular class, and you'll be able to download the workbook and also all of the code examples from there. Okay, so are you ready for some ChatGPT? This is going to be some exciting stuff. So a lot of people nowadays, when you read the media reports about ChatGPT, folks are going into the user interface that is being provided by OpenAI and asking ChatGPT questions there, right? That's cool, that's interesting, that's neat for the tech reporters, but we are real technology professionals, so we want to write our own code. The great thing about the ChatGPT API is what this allows us to do is this allows us to send queries or make requests from the ChatGPT service and get the response from that request and then do with it as we see fit. So we're going to go through the first lessons here, basically showing you how this API works, and then after that we're going to provide some real world examples. So we're going to have like a little conversation. We're going to actually create a GUI app using tkinter, and we're going to have a conversation basically going back and forth where you're able to ask ChatGPT questions and then you're able to ask follow-on questions based off of the response. We're actually going to create an AutoBlog. Yes, something that is going to truly destroy social media and basically web publishing as we know it. We literally are going to be able to put a list of prompts together. So we're going to have like 5 prompts, and basically what our code is going to do is we're going to do a 4x loop through those prompts, feed those prompts to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is going to provide a response, not simply going to provide a blog post, it's going to provide a blog post formatted in HTML. We're just going to simply dump that into an HTML web page, and so essentially within 10-20 seconds, you will get 5 unique, newly created blog posts that you could literally publish to the internet if you wanted to. We're also going to do a story time app. So if you don't want to deal with your kids at the end of the day, you have more important things like going and watching Netflix, right? You can type a little prompt into the little app that we're going to create, and then ChatGPT will literally verbally tell your kids a story. So basically what's going to happen is we're going to request from ChatGPT a story about whatever we ask it for, and then what's going to happen is we're going to then take that text, we are going to send it through Google Text-to-Speech API, and then Google is then going to tell the story to our snot-nosed little brats. So again, we can go off and do whatever it is that we want to do that's more important than mommy and dad, than doing the kid stuff, right? So that's the kind of cool stuff that we're going to be doing today, and that's the kind of thing that makes ChatGPT really very interesting. Now, if you're interested, if you're going to be using the ChatGPT API, it is important to understand the interface that you use for that kind of web thing that you've been seeing on the news is not the same as the API interface. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to go to OpenAI.com. From here, you're going to do something like click on API references, and then API references, it's going to give you a page, and then on the left-hand side over there, it'll either say log in or create account. So you're going to go over there, you're going to log in, you're going to create an account, and then this is what you should be looking at. If you see an interface where you can type stuff in, you're in the wrong place. So go to OpenAI, go to the API reference, you'll see something like that. Go over to the left-hand corner, you'll be able to create an account there. And then once you do, you'll get $18 in credits, at least now. So whatever this is, April 20th, I think it is, 2023, you get $18 in credits that are usable for the first 3 months. And that's actually a lot of credits. When you're simply doing text communication with ChatGPT, $18 is just, you can write books and books and books and books and books off of it. Basically, with ChatGPT, how the pricing model works is something called tokens. So 750 words equals approximately 1,000 tokens, right? Now, 1,000 tokens cost $0.002. What that means is 1,000 tokens cost a fifth of a cent, right? So you can get 5,000 tokens for 1 penny, right? So you can do a lot with that. I've been doing a lot of testing. I've been doing these classes. My students have been doing these classes. And up until this point, I think I've used about $5. Where it does start to cost you a lot of money, we're going to do a class on this later, is when you start using DALL-E. So when you start trying to create images using something called DALL-E, that will run through your money really, 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 really quickly. But as far as doing this text back and forth, they should be really, really, really inexpensive. The one thing I will warn you about, though, is with this whole token thing, this is something that tech companies do to what's called obfuscate how much you're going to be paying at the end of the day for this service, right? So instead of saying 1,000 words cost a penny, right? If you know 1,000 words cost a penny, it's very easy for you to budget off of that. And if you can budget off of that, then you can go to the CEO with what the approximate bill is going to be, and the CEO can go, oh my God, that's expensive. No, right? If you give the CEO good information, the CEO is likely to say no to you. So what these tech companies do is they would do what's called obfuscating. So encryption means you can't read. So if I encrypt something, it means you are not able to read it at all. Obfuscating means you can read it. It just gets really confusing and it makes your brain and eyeballs hurt. And so you give up trying to understand it and just go about whatever it is that you're going to do. So an issue that you can run into, like for us, so in an educational environment, in a lab environment, again, $18 is so many tokens. It doesn't matter. You're not going to hit the $18 limit. What I will say, though, is if you do this work and then you put this into a production environment, so you do this work and you put this into Travelocity or Khan Academy or Amazon or something like that, and you actually start hammering the hell out of the API, those fifths of a cent times God knows how many users you have can turn into a metric crap ton of money really, really, really quickly. And if you're one of these people that wants to make AI the core of your infrastructure, and you make it the core of your infrastructure before you realize it's going to cost you $20,000 a month, you can run into some problems. So I will say with this whole token thing, do make sure you do your calculations and your math correctly for if you're going to be putting this into a production environment. Because really what you got to be thinking about is, okay, 750 words, that's going to cost me a fifth of a cent. How many users are going to be hitting my site per day? How many queries are they going to be making per day? What is making a query? So it's not simply that the user inputs something and makes a query, but every time there's a recommendation, basically you hit the recommendation algorithm. If the recommendation algorithm is being triggered, and that's triggering ChatGPT, that might be triggering something. If you have something auto-update in the background, imagine your users go to a page and you have a couple of auto-updating feeds. Every time that feed auto-updates, that might be hitting ChatGPT, that might be costing you a fifth of a cent or a half of a cent, times five panels on that web page, times 10,000 visitors a day. And holy hell, something that was dirt cheap in the lab environment becomes just brutal in the real world. So do be careful about that. The other thing to be thinking about is with the free service, and again, the free service was pretty good, right? Basically, the only issue that I ran into with the free service is they do now have a 3 request per minute rate limiter. So what a request is when you make a request to ChatGPT and they send you back a response, that's a request. One of the interesting things with this is when I started doing loops, right? So for X in list, so automatically creating those blog posts, doing some of the other things that we were doing, I was hitting it like 5 times. And so I was hitting it 5 times in 30 seconds. That's obviously more than 3 per minute. And then things were failing out. Again, if you're going to be doing these classes for students, right? You're going to take this information, you're going to do classes for students. If you have 10 people in your class and they all start writing the scripts at the exact same time, you will hit that 3 request per minute rate limit. So just do keep that in mind. It's very easy to increase your account. So basically you can go over, so once you've signed up, you'll see that little B, that personal thing over there. You can see the fake email address. I'm sure somebody's gonna be like, we know your fake email address now. Okay, good for you. Anyways, you can go down and for the API keys that we're going to be dealing with, you go to View API Keys here, you click on this, you will see a couple of API keys were created, and when I want a new API key, I can create a new API key, I can give it a title, and I can create a new key. This is the key that we are then going to be plugging into the code. So if you basically copy and paste my code, and it fails because you didn't give it an API key, this is what they are looking for. Now, this is going to be the only time you can copy this particular API key. As soon as I say done, so click on this. So if I click on that, it allows me to copy, right? API key copied. Because as soon as I'm done, basically it's being created. It gives me the last 4 digits of the API key just so I can keep track of the API keys, but I have no other way to access the API key past this point, right? The only thing that you can do is you can create new API keys and you can delete the API keys, or revoke, as they say, revoke the API keys that have already been created. Now, I know some people at home, they're going to be like, oh, look, Eli's showing us his API keys today. He's stupid. No, as soon as I get done recording this particular class, I'm going to go here and I'm going to revoke the API key that you are seeing in my code, and it is going to go bye-bye, and you are not going to be able to use it. This is something to be thinking about once you start trying to design larger infrastructure, is managing API keys. So remember, all of your code that's doing API calls, they require an API key to actually access the service that they're accessing. From a security standpoint, you're going to want to revoke, you're going to want to refresh API keys every once in a while. So one of the things that you do have to think about is what happens when you revoke an old API key. Is your entire infrastructure going to fail? That is a class for a different day. So anyways, that's the basics for creating your account with OpenAI and getting this API key. Again, if you do pay for the OpenAI service, you get more than 3 requests per minute, so this might be useful for you. And one of the nice things with it is for billing, you can actually set usage limits, right? If you want to make sure that you're not going to get a $10,000 bill at the end of the month, that you don't accidentally trigger a while true loop. Anyways, you can go to these usage limits, and with this, you can see that the hard limit that I set for my entire account is $20 per month, and the soft limit is $10 a month. So when I hit $10 a month, I'll get an email notification, and when I hit $20 a month, it'll absolutely stop. If you are going to be teaching this to your students, make sure you set this hard limit, because one of your students will go, what's a while true loop? And they will find out on your credit card. So make that hard limit. So anyways, with that, that's the basics of how to create the ChatGPT account, some of the pricing, that type of deal. Now, setting up your Ubuntu environment to make sure all of the labs work today is relatively simple. The first thing that we're going to want to make sure that we've done is install tkinter. Tkinter is the GUI framework that allows us to create graphical user interfaces using Python. And so for that, all we do is we type in sudo apt install python 3-tk. Basically, you put that command in, you type in your password, 12345 6 around here, and this is going to say it's already been installed, right? But you're going to want to install that. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to install pip. So pip is the package installer for Python. Ubuntu, for whatever reason, doesn't have it installed by default. So sudo apt install pip. And then it's going to go through and it's going to tell me I've already installed it, so you're going to be fine. Past that, then what we're going to do is we need to install the OpenAI module or framework for Python. So that's one of the big things to understand, right? What a lot of people don't get when they start dealing with artificial intelligence or a lot of these modern systems is they think, oh my golly, it's so complicated, I'll never be able to understand it, right? It's one of the sad things. You see these smart, motivated people, they see things like artificial intelligence and they're like, oh, I could never be smart enough to do that. And one of the things that I tell my students is probably not. Probably not. What? What do you mean? Here's the thing. You don't gotta be that smart. You're right. Elon Musk is brilliant. Whoever the guy that's actually running OpenAI, they're brilliant. Are you that smart? Probably not. Let's be honest. Probably aren't. But here's the thing. AI is hard. Artificial intelligence is hard. APIs are not. APIs are dirt simple. So one of the reasons that APIs are dirt simple is you're able to install into Python a lot of packages and libraries and whatever else is required to basically interact with ChatGPT and OpenAI so that all you have to do is write 5 lines of code. Literally, when I start showing you the basics of ChatGPT, we're talking about a lot of things you can do in 10 lines of code, and most of those lines of code are frankly copy and paste, right? The reason that we're able to do that is because we're able to install the module into Python. So what you're going to do is you're going to do pip3 install OpenAI. Do make sure you do not misspell this. One of the things that hackers have been doing lately is basically they create nefarious Python packages for people to install so that the hackers can compromise their systems. And one of the things they do is they pick popular names and then misspell it by a little bit. So you type in the wrong name and there's actually a package out there. So you install that nefarious package and then your system gets compromised. Again, another reason why you should have a lab computer, so that if your lab computer is compromised, then your lab computer is compromised. Not the computer with your online billing and emails and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so pip3 install OpenAI. You use pip3. So pip is what you install into Linux, but the command is pip3. Anyways, you hit enter, and it goes through requirement already satisfied. So again, for me, it's already there. So nothing else happens. For you, when you go through and you install it, it should go through a little installation routine, say yes, and you'll be good to go. And with that, we can dive into the code. So now we get to dive into our first lab, and our first lab is going to be using the 3.0 Davinci model. So in today's labs, we're going to be using the 3.0 Davinci model that ChatGPT has, and we're going to be using the 3.5 Turbo model. If you're watching this within my particular timeline, although the 4 API currently exists and large companies are using it, people like you and me don't actually have access to it. Now, before you go, oh my God, this is obsolete even before I watch it, just realize that all of these models, you actually interact with them in different ways. The responses that you get really are different, so that there are reasons even now, even if you have access to the 4 model, there are reasons that you might use the 3 model or the 3.5 model. don't think of, when you look at the 3 and the 3.5 and the 4, don't think of this as the previous model is completely obsolete. Just think about they built that model with a certain mentality that has now changed to a new mentality that then gets changed to the latest mentality. So again, there's reasons that you might want to use the 3 or the 3.5, even if you have access to the 4 model. One of the things I'm going to show you in one of these labs is we're actually going to give the exact same prompt to the 3 model and to the 3.5 model, and you will see that you get a significantly different response back. And so this is something you need to be thinking about when you're going to be coding your particular projects. So anyways, we take a look at this here. Pretty simple. This is a pretty simple thing, right? So import OpenAI. So since we installed the OpenAI module with pip3, that should now be installed. And now we're going to feed it our API key. And again, this will get deleted as soon as this class is over. You put your API key here. If you're a little bit more advanced, you may set your API key as an environment variable. I thought about doing it with this class, but that adds a little bit more complication for the students, so that's why we're doing this particular way. If you understand how to set environment variables, that is the proper way to do it. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Anyways, so OpenAI, the API key is, you put it within the single quotation marks and you feed it that API key we created before. Then we're going to create the query. What are we going to ask ChatGPT? Now with me, I'm kind of ornery and I'm kind of curious, and so I pull questions out of my buttocks. Why ask a reasonable question of artificial intelligence? I could ask somebody I know reasonable questions. I'm going to ask stupid things. So the question that I'm going to be asking is, what was the Battle of the Frank? And you're like, Battle of Frank? What was the Battle of the Frank? It didn't exist. It didn't exist. I'm just like, hey, the Battle of the Frank, a battle that doesn't exist. What is the answer that I'm going to receive? And again, this is one thing you need to be thinking about. This is one of the things I talk about in the technology world, where you want hard fails, you don't want soft fails. What I mean by a hard fail is when your computer crashes. When your computer crashes, when the program crashes, when it doesn't work, the emails don't come in, the website doesn't come in, you get a hard fail. You do something, there's supposed to be a result, you don't get it at all. All right, that is something that's very easy to troubleshoot. One of the issues you run into in the real world of technology is what happens when you get soft fails. When you get a result, it doesn't look right. I don't think that's the result that I'm supposed to be getting, but I am getting a result. And so when you run into those problems, it can be a bit of a disaster. I see that being a real big problem with AI. Not necessarily with hallucinations. Again, everybody's been hyper-focusing on hallucinations. But beyond hallucinations, what if it just fills in blanks that it shouldn't fill in, right? The Battle of the Frank. What if it thinks I'm talking about something else? And so it corresponds, the Battle of the Frank, to apparently there was a battle in Frankfurt, right? So it's like, oh, he's talking about the Battle of Frankfurt, so he gives a response, or the Battle of Franklin, or the Battle of, I don't know, hot dogs or something like that, right? One of the issues that you can run into, again, with the real world of artificial intelligence, and again, this is not hallucinations. Everybody focuses on certain things with AI. This isn't hallucinations. This is just where it fills in blanks where it shouldn't fill in blanks, right? Maybe you made a mistake. If you got a hard fail, you would realize you made a mistake. Since it's filling in blanks, it then fills in those blanks and gives an answer that fits, right? Something to think about there. Anyways, so this is going to be the object that we're going to be creating. The variable is response. So response equals OpenAI.completion.create, open parentheses. Then, since this is Python, everything gets tabbed in, gets a white space in. Model equals text Davinci 003. Prompt equals query. So again, since we're doing coding, I want to feed things in from variables. I want to deal with variable values, but you could do prompt equals what was the Battle of Frank. You could do that here. I just want to feed it in this way, so in later examples, we can start dynamically feeding in values into the prompt. Then you're going to deal with temperature. So temperature, top P, frequency penalty, and presence penalty. They're their own worlds. Basically, what you're able to do with the Davinci model is you're able to dial in the accuracy of the result by screwing around with the temperature and the frequency penalty and the presence penalty and the top P. That becomes its own world. Go to somebody else to learn all that kind of stuff. That's when you're creating something for a production environment and you literally need the absolute best result, and you're willing to sit there for hours or days dialing in these numbers to get the best result. We're not going to go over that today, so leave those as 0. One of the big things is max tokens. So whenever you're using tokens, one of the important things to understand is both the query and the response count toward the token cost, right? So if you feed it a long question, and then you get a long response, one of the issues you may run into is that there's not enough tokens to fulfill the full response, and so you'll get the response halfway written. One of the interesting things with how this AI model works is it kind of just writes out. So it doesn't, apparently, from what I understand, it doesn't actually create the complete response and then send it to you. It actually creates the response on the fly. So the problem is with this max tokens, if you run out of tokens, it will literally stop halfway through the response. So if you go and you look at the examples on the OpenAI website, many times max tokens will equal something like 60. And so 60 is enough for you to ask a question and get like 5 words back. So we're going to give it a max token equals 1,000. So that's going to be about 750 words. So that should be enough for what we're trying to do here. Again, something to be thinking about with the responses. Do you want 750 words? Do you want 1,500 words? Do you want, 3,000 words or something like that? If you say, chat, basically you say, I want a 3,000 word response about the Battle of the Frank, and you don't feed it enough tokens, it's going to fail out. So the tokens are the big one. The other thing that you'll see, which is kind of weird, when you go and you look at the documentation, the API documentation on OpenAI, is there's actually also a stop value. So you can have stop equals. And this is where ChatGPT will stop wherever it sees a particular character string. Right? So I don't know if there's a word you want it to hard stop on, not skip over, it stops there. You can actually have a stop value here. I'm not sure why you even want the stop value, but maybe you want the stop value. One of the problems that I ran into is when I was doing these classes, I of course copied and pasted the code so that I could tweak it a little bit. I overlooked that stop value. And one of the things is, again, in the default code, the stop value was set to /n. So basically means next line. And the weird thing is the response that comes back from ChatGPT is /n, whatever the response is. So literally, what I copied and pasted from OpenAI literally had the stop value be the first value that gets sent. So anyways, be careful with the stop value. Then what we're going to do here is we're going to print, and we're going to print the entire response. So the response that comes back from ChatGPT is something called JSON. So this is the data format that's used in order to send data for these API calls. Basically, there's a specific way that you parse that data. So I want to get back that entire response just so we can take a look at that big old thing. And then after that, I'm going to print out just the text that we want. So basically, when you look at the JSON response, it's essentially dictionaries and lists. And so you put in the index for the dictionaries and list to get what you want, right? So we're going to print out response. So the response is that JSON that's coming back to you from the choices index, from the 0 index of the list within choices. We then want to print out whatever's in text, right? So that's basically what this is. So when all we want is the text, this is what we print out. If we want the whole JSON response, we literally print out all of that. So with that, let me hit the play button, the run button, I suppose. It is now running. And yeah, I already did this before. But anyways, it'll take a couple seconds to run. That is one thing to realize. ChatGPT is not the fastest thing in the world. which may or may not matter for your particular application. A lot of times when you're dealing with APIs in the modern world, you're used to them being very, 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 very fast. And so again, think about that user interface, that user experience. ChatGPT isn't, it's fast. I mean, again, it's that whole fast thing. It's fast, but it's not fast. Anyways. Okay, so I should have cleared this, but anyway, okay, let's see here. So this is my prompt. This is when I ran the script. Okay, so this is what we're talking about, that JSON response and how it looks like dictionaries and lists, right? So open squiggly bracket is essentially opening a dictionary. So within this, we have choices. So choices is a key for this dictionary. And so this is what we're going to want. We're going to want this text right here. So we're going to say choices. And then in choices, the value for choices actually opens a list, right? So when we open the list, there's actually only one index in that list. So that's an index of 0. At index 0 in the list is another dictionary. This has keys. So finish, reason, index, log, probs, right? So we're going to go to the text key, and then we want to print this out, right? So that's where, when we go up here, we see choices. So down here, so choices, right? Choices, that's a list. 0, it's a first in that list. And then down here, text, that's how we get to this if you're going to mentally work through how to get the values. The other important thing here is you do get more information, like say finish reason, when it was created, the ID number, if you want to track by ID number, some kind of tracking thing there. Also usage, again, with that whole token thing, figuring out how many tokens you're spending. So for this, the completion tokens, so how much it cost to do the completion was 82 tokens. The prompt was 7 tokens, and the total tokens used were 89. So that may be of use to you. And then finally, we're simply going to print out. Again, choice is 0 text. We're just simply going to print out. And again, this is where this is not a hallucination. This is where it's adding in additional stuff. The Battle of Franklin was a major battle of the American Civil War that was fought November 30th, 1864 in Franklin, Tennessee. It was a Confederate victory, blase, 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 blase. So anyways, so this is the 3.0 Davinci model. The important things to be thinking about is this is how you get the response from the Davinci model. And then the important thing is this is how you're able to parse what's called the completion. So the completion that's the value that comes back. And this is how we get the actual text that we're looking for. This is different with the 3.5 model. So now we're going to Lab 2. Lab 2 is the 3.5 turbo model. And when you start taking a look at the 3.5 turbo model, you're like, yeah, that's a lot more modern. That's a lot more of what modern audiences would want. And yes, this is. But as you will see, the response you get from the 3.5 model also looks like a response for modern audiences. As an AI model, I don't have an opinion. Oh my God, the extra crap that it has. Holy hell. Anyways, but I'm going to show you that in a second. You'll understand the joke in a second. So again, this is the 3.5 model. You'll notice the response, how we get the response is a little bit different here, and how we parse the response down here is slightly different. Import OpenAI, because you got to import the module. OpenAI, the API key equals the API key. Now I put two variables here with 2 variable values: nationality of France and query of who is the president. The reason that I did that is one of the interesting things that you can do with the 3.5 model is essentially you can nudge the answer that ChatGPT is going to give you one direction or the other. Why this is useful is it means that you can reuse the exact same queries to ChatGPT and then just simply dynamically change certain values so that the answer is appropriate for whoever is asking the question. Again, think about this modern world. You go to a social media site and you dump a whole bunch of information in that social media site. What country you're from, what city you're in, all that kind of different stuff, right? So what's kind of interesting here, like with this nationality, is you could have a script that dynamically determines what nationality you are and then answers the question based off of your nationality, right? So instead of being, who is the president of the United States, and then having to have that modified a million different ways, you can simply say, who is the president of X? You can then feed in the nationality, and then it will find for that particular user. So we look here, response equals. So with this, it's open.ai chat completion. Again, they modify things slightly. If you notice here, it was openai.completion. So it's .chat completion here. So do be careful about that. .create, model equals GPT hyphen 3.5 turbo, and then messages. This is where we give roles to ChatGPT 3.5, right? Think about it. You are the director of an artificial intelligence melodrama, and you're telling your premier actor how to play their part. It really is kind of think about that. It's the way to think about it, right? Think about you are directing the actor that is ChatGPT to play a role. And so you have three different types of roles here. So messages, so you have role and system. So you're only going to have one system role, content equals, and this is who is ChatGPT. When ChatGPT gives the response, right? Who are they? Are they a president? Are they a tour guide? Are they a tax advisor? Are they a hobo? Right? What voice are they going to use? What perspective? Right? What is the perspective of AI? Oh, we're not even going to get into where that goes. But anyways, that's what we're doing, right? So here, system, content equals, you are a tour guide, right? Figure make it easy. Then we're going to do assistant. So there's only one system role. So you just set who are you. Then you have assistants. You can actually have multiple assistants here to kind of push or pull the answer in one way or the other. So what we're going to have here is role assistant content answer. So basically what we're going to say here is answer as a, and we're going to concatenate and put in nationality citizen. Right? So answer as as a France citizen. Answer as an American citizen. Answer as a Brazilian citizen, right? So this could be fed in dynamically based off of whatever, and then it'll answer based off of that. Then you have the role of user. Content equals the query. So you'll only have one user thing here, and that's basically the question that you're going to be asking to ChatGPT. So one system role, one user role, multiple assistant roles if you want to dump them in. Then we come down here, again, print the response. So this is going to be a JSON response. We're going to get all the information back just so we can take a look at it. And then in order to pull the specific information that we care about, we're going to go response, choices, 0, message, content. That's how we get the text from this particular question. So I'm going to go and I'm going to run this. Run. And so this is what we get, right? So this is the prompt up here. So choices, 0, message, content. I swear to you, if you're new to all this, it does get easier. It gets easier the longer you do this, and two, frankly, you just copy and paste most of this crap anyway. So anyways, right? So we get the finish region, a stop, we get an index here, we get a time created, we get an ID. Again, we may want to track that for something. Again, remember in the coding world, you want unique identifiers for different things so you can track things through the system. The model, usage, so this took 37, so completion tokens was 37, prompt tokens was 32, total tokens was 69. So that gives you an idea. And then here, oh my golly, ChatGPT is truly 3.5 is truly created for modern audiences. As an AI language, as an AI language model, my responses should not be taken as an accurate representation of reality. Cancel culture has gotten so bad, even the artificial intelligence is scared crapless. However, at the time this response was written, the president of France was Emmanuel Macron. I do think there's something interesting there. Now, the important thing, again, oh, haha, that's funny. Haha, cancel culture has gotten so bad, even the AI is scared crapless. That's humorous, right? That's a joke. But, right, we're here to be tech professional. We're here to be serious. One of the important things you have to think about as a tech professional, one of the issues with cancel culture, right? Anyways, one of the issues with this kind of response is if you're having some kind of system, so the user is asking a question, it's spitting back a result. Remember, you're going to take this response from ChatGPT. You then have to parse it, right? Basically read through it and rewrite it in order to give the user something that's actually useful and not frickin' stupid. So realize one of the reasons, again, that the 3.5 model can actually suck is you're gonna have to look at all these responses and learn how to rip out this crap. This is not what your end user wants to see. Your end user does not want to see the AI dithering and worrying about cancel culture. They just want an answer. They want Emmanuel Macron, right? And so this is an issue you can run into with the 3.5 model is it's so wordy, it's so verbose that it can actually be a worse output at the end of the day, because when you go and try to turn that into something for the end user, you've got to figure out how to parse it and write the code to actually give a decent response. So let's see here. What if we do Germany? Basically run the same thing out of curiosity. Does a dither on that. Again, just to kind of show you. Again, yeah, as an AI model, I do not have real life experiences or emotions. I can't make this stuff up. Don't cancel me. Don't cancel me. But to answer your question, the current president of Germany as of 2021 is Frank-Walter Steinmeier. And so... yeah, what's weird, and they've actually added this, and this might be a larger problem for you when you're dealing with these responses. It wasn't this bad a few days ago. So I've been working with ChatGPT for like a month and a half since they opened up the API, and you used to get this kind of dithering like a month or so ago when you talked about how did the world begin or how did the universe begin, or when you ask kind of like religious-y type questions. Then it would dither. Then it'd be like, I'm an AI, don't blame me, which. Again, you can kind of understand where it's like, okay, OpenAI doesn't want to get into theocracy or anything, or theology. What gets weird here, though, is that they're now doing these responses for who is the president of a country. And so again, something that you have to be thinking about is if they keep changing these responses, how easy is it going to be for you to make sure that your code base is updated to deal with this idiocy? This is one of the big things. Like, I talk a lot about business and I talk a lot about social issues, and I try to talk about politics in a non-biased way. And a lot of times people say, Eli, stop talking about social issues. Stop talking about politics. All we care about is technology. What I want you to understand is IT, information technology, is tied to society. It's tied to social issues. It truly is. It's tied to politics. When you see this kind of dithering coming as an API response, this is because somebody wrote this code so that this AI wouldn't get canceled, right? That political mentality, that social response, then provides you with this garbage that makes your life more difficult, right? So again, do remember, politics and social issues are not in any way, shape, or form separated from the technology world. And so that's one of the things you have to keep your eye on, just so hopefully you don't lose your mind. So now we get to Lab 3, and this allows us to compare and contrast the responses between the 3.0 and the 3.5 model to try to determine for our particular project which model is going to work best. So basically with this, essentially all we're going to do is we're going to create the query, and then we are simply going to feed that exact same query into the 3 model and into the 3.5 model. And then we're going to print out the results to see what is more useful for us. So with this, pretty simple here. Import OpenAI as we did before, feed in the API key as we did before, put in a query, put in a stupid query like we did before. What was the Battle of Frank? Who the hell knows? Then what you notice here is I did response 3. So where this has been response equals, so this is response 3, and this is response 3.5 down here. So response 3 equals OpenAI completion, because this is the 3.0 model. The Davinci model, the query, we're feeding it, temperature is 0, we're going to give it 1,000 tokens, so we get a decent response. Top P, we leave at 1, frequency penalty, we leave at 0, and presence penalty, we leave at 0. So basically, this is just the default standard. This is what you dump into to ChatGPT to give it a response. The only thing that might be different there is that max tokens of 1,000. Then we're going to go down response 3.5 for the 3.5 model. OpenAI chat completion. Again, just remember with these models, it is slightly different. Completion for 3, chat completion for 3.5. Create, model equals 3.5 turbo. Messages, I'm leaving these blank. The system role and the assistant role, I'm going to leave those blank so it doesn't get additionally biased here. And then we're simply going to do the user role as the query as that question. Then we're simply going to print out GPT 3.0 says, and all we're going to print out is the text this time. So response 3, choices 0 text, that will be the text from the 3 model. Print /n, so this is next line so in the text world /n is next line, /t is tab. So we're just simply going to add a line, right, between these so it's easier to see. /n GPT 3.5 turbo says, print response 3.5, choices 0 message content, right? And so we're going to print out and we're going to see what do they say about the Battle of Frank. Again, it takes a second. It's not fast. We're in the Amazon world. Everything's got to be so fast. There we go. Okay, so 3.0 says, and you'll notice actually, you start getting some weird artifacts. I was asked about this in the class that we did the other night. And yeah, sometimes, and again, something to be thinking about when you're on a parse, you're going to be sending these responses to the end user. You get some weird artifacts. So I think this is adding the Lin. So basically it's like Frank Lin. I think that's why you see that there, but you do get these kind of artifacts. 3.0 says the Battle of Frank Lin, right, was a major battle of the American Civil War, like we saw before. GPT 3.5 Turbo says, I'm sorry, there is no widely recognized battle called the Battle of Frank. Can you provide more information or context to help me understand what you're referring to, right? So 2 entirely different answers from ChatGPT. We can go up and, I don't know, out of curiosity, let's type in who discovered America. Let's say I actually don't know. I actually don't know what the answer is going to be. So let me go down here. Let me just clear this. Don't do that. That's one thing. Always making sure where your cursor actually is. Okay, then we're going to run this. And we're going to see what the 3.0 model says and what the 3.5 model says. We'll see if that 3.5 gives us a little dithering. I don't know. 3.0 says the answer to this question is disputed. Oh, interesting. While it's widely accepted that Christopher Columbus was the first European to reach the Americas in 1492, there is evidence that other Europeans, blase, blase, blase. right? So that's one particular answer. 3.5 Turbo says, Christopher Columbus is traditionally credited with discovering America in 1492. However, it is important to note that there were already people living in America before Columbus arrived, specifically indigenous people. So, again, those are two different answers. It is kind of funny, though. Again, doing these, I'm doing these in real time as I'm talking into a camera. What I find very funny about 3.5 is it was dithering to high hell and back on who was the president of France. When you ask 3.5 who the president of France is, it's like, I'm an AI, don't blame me. When you ask something that is actually more controversial, it just gives you a response. Again, why I point that kind of thing out, you're going to have to parse these responses. And the fact that the response isn't necessarily even logical that you get back, it'll be one thing. Like if every single answer that 3.5 get, it always gave you that preamble of I am an AI, don't blame me, right? If it always gave a preamble, that's fine. You can just write some Python code to strip out the preamble before you ship it off to the end user. One of the things I really want you to grasp here is, again, with these responses, you're getting back responses that don't necessarily, how they're written sometimes don't necessarily make logical sense. So when you're trying to parse this for your end user or dump it into your data store, you are going to have to do a lot of testing to try to figure out what the responses for your particular types of questions look like so that you can parse and deal with them appropriately. So now we get to lab number 4, and this is about bias. Again, one of the interesting things to be thinking about with artificial intelligence is what is the perspective of artificial intelligence, right? Beauty or facts are in the eye of the beholder. How does AI see the world? And how does AI think other people see the world? And one of the things to really be considering when you start going out to develop projects that are going to be using AI is that psychologically humans like to believe that computers are right, that they're infallible, right? If you want to know the answer, what does somebody say? Go to Google. Because there's this idea when you tippy-tap type into Google and you get a response, that is truth. Now, any of us that have been in the tech field for the past 10 years know that's a load of garbage, but it doesn't mean it doesn't feel true, right? As Stephen Colbert used to say, truthiness, it feels true, even if it's not, right? So one of the interesting things to be thinking about when you start developing applications with artificial intelligence is how can you skew the AI response into the direction you want it skewed, right? So you're going to have users and they're going to come to your application and you want the answer, again, to be biased in your particular direction. Again, I'm not getting anybody's case here, but if you're a Christian and somebody sits down to tippy-tap type into your AI application, you want it biased to the Christian worldview, right? You know, you go to the priest and the priest says something, and you're like, I don't know if I believe the priest. And the priest says, well, hey, go to priestai.com and ask the artificial intelligence. They tippy-tap type in, and it gives the exact same response as the priest does. Oh my God, that is the truth. Again, Democrat or Republican, right? Hindu, Muslim, right? Again, I'm just using placeholders, people. I'm just using placeholders. But again, it's important to be thinking, again, how the answers get skewed and whether you can or whether you should skew the answers for your particular application. A lot of what gets focused on right now when we talk about artificial intelligence is the bias of the AI itself, right? So here in my timeline in April of 2023, one of the big things is that Elon Musk says that OpenAI is too woke. So what Elon Musk is saying is the ChatGPT, the OpenAI infrastructure, that is coded to be too woke. And that's an argument. That's an argument. That's a discussion. That's not what we're talking about here, right? That's its own thing. One of the things that gets more curious, though, is you as a programmer. Can you skew the results into a particular direction? Woke, not woke, whatever else, right? Because remember, we're dealing with this API, and again, in the next couple of labs, we're actually going to start creating user interfaces, right? This is on the back end. What the user is simply going to see a form or a web form or something like that, and that's what they're interacting with. This is what's going on the back end. So can you add things to the back end, again, to guide the result? So with this, import OpenAI as we do, OpenAI key as we do, query. This, unfortunately, has gotten less interested in the past month. When I did this a month ago, and again, it's important to understand that AI changes. When I did this a month ago, this was a hilarious response. It was very interesting, the response that we got. It's not as hilarious anymore, I gotta say. How did the universe begin? Right? That's a big question there. How did it begin? Again, especially in the modern world. Then we're going to create a bias. So we're going to create a list of basically different types of perspectives to question how the AI sees these different types of perspectives. So Democrat, Republican, Christian, or Pastafarian. Right? If I'm one of these types of people, how did the universe begin? But again, think about this. How did the universe begin? And we're skewing it. So we're going to come down here. We're going to print the query. So we're going to print the query just so we've seen that. For X in bias, so this is simply a for loop for every item in a list. Then we do the tab in, response, normal response equals, so we're doing the 3.5 model here. OpenAI, chat completion create, model equals 3.5. Role of the system, we're just gonna leave that blank. Assistant, content as a, so as a Democrat, loop, as a Republican, loop, as a Christian, loop, as a Pastafarian, loop. And then the query, how did the universe begin? And the important thing to understand here is this is not what the end user is ever supposed to see. They're not supposed to see how you're skewing the AI results. Then we're going to come down here, print next line as a whatever it is. And then we're going to print response, choices, 0, message, content. We go and we print that out. How did the universe begin? Dun, dun, dun. Come on, be funny, be funny. Be as funny as you used to be. As a Democrat, as an AI language model, I do not have personal political belief or stance. In regards, let's see here. Okay. In regards to the origin of the universe, the prevailing scientific theory is the Big Bang Theory, which suggests the universe began approximately blah, blah. As a Republican, as an AI language model, I do not have personal beliefs. Oops. Let me go scroll back up. I do not have personal beliefs. However, the current scientific theory regarding the origin of the universe is the Big Bang Theory. This theory proposes the universe has a singularity, blase, 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 blase. So, okay, so those are two Big Bang theories. The interesting thing is, a month ago, Republican actually said creationism, which is kind of curious. If we go down here, as a Christian, as an AI language model, I don't have personal beliefs. But I can share with you what many Christians believe about the beginning of the universe based on the interpretation of the Bible. According to the Bible, God created the universe, right? And so basically, again, if you're parsing this, you just rip out all that. And say, how did the world begin? You're asking the artificial intelligence, God created the universe. Well, come on now, little Billy. Even AI knows that God created the universe. And then we come down here to Pastafarian. This is awesome. And this is what I don't get. Again, I'm doing this live. The Pastafarian, there is no dithering. There is no dithering as a Pastafarian. Look at this. As a Christian, it's like I'm an AI model. As a Republican, I'm an AI model. As a Democrat, I'm an AI model. And then you come down here to Pastafarian as a pasta-based religion. Again, this is where, again, this is important for the whole parsing issue. As a pasta-based religion, Pastafarianism does not have a specific doctrine or belief about the origins of the universe. Some adherents may believe in scientific theories such as the Big Bang, while others may believe in the divine creation of the spaghetti monster. Noodly creation myth. Ultimately, belief in how the universe began is a personal decision. So anyways, that's what they got for the Pastafarians. Again, it's not as funny as it was before. It was actually very funny before. It had the whole how the world began from the Pastafarian ideal. So anyways, this is the kind of thing to think about, and how you can inherently skew the bias in the application that you're creating. And if you're not an app developer, just to realize that the developers at this end with the back-end coding language can actually skew the responses that you're getting. So now we get to Lab 5, and Lab 5 proves the death of the modern world. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel a little bit nauseous, to be honest with you. Basically, with this lab, what we're going to do is we are going to feed ChatGPT a list of topics, and then it's going to automatically create blog posts based off of those topics, format those blog posts in HTML with the HTML tags, and write these blog posts to a text file. Now, we are writing to a text file here because we're just doing a class on ChatGPT. I don't want to get into databases or whatever else, but do realize with this that you can be dumping into any kind of data store. So imagine you have a WordPress website. So a WordPress website is a content management system. It uses a database called MySQL generally as the back end. So with this script, if you knew what you were doing, you could literally auto dump these values into the back end database for WordPress and basically automatically create a WordPress blog. So again, that gets into more complicated with the back end, data stores and that type of thing. But here we're just going to be simply printing to a web page so you really grasp what is going on. Now, an important thing to take a look at here is you're going to be noticing that we're using the Davinci 3 model. And again, this is where I talk about the new models aren't necessarily better. At least for me, maybe I don't know how to prompt, and that is a possibility. When I was trying to do this particular project, and I used the 3.5 model, because that made more sense, it refused to give me HTML tags. I would make the request, and I would tell it, format this in HTML, and then it would just simply give the response without any of the HTML formatting. Again, to be clear, maybe I didn't know how to prompt it properly, but I prompted it about 1,000 different ways and never really seemed to work out. So what I found interesting is that the 3.0 model, you can literally tell it to give you a response formatted in HTML, and it will do that. All right. So anyways, so with this, we're going to import the OpenAI module as we do. We're going to give the API key as we do. Then we're going to create a posts list. So these are the types of posts that we want. We're going to give it Python. We're going to give it Go. We're going to give it Objective-C. We're going to give it Dart. And we're going to give it Golang. Right? And so with this list could be getting dumped in somewhere else dynamically. So again, you want to think about how the modern internet is going to be destroyed. If you are a tech professional, you have most likely dealt with SEO specialists. Imagine with SEO specialists start to understand how to make this work. Imagine if you had a script to go to Google Trends, whatever the most popular trends are, you would pull whatever the trends are into a list, and then every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds, you would basically loop through that list to automatically create blog posts. Now imagine one SEO specialist doing that. And you're like, oh, that sounds bad. Now imagine 10,000 SEO specialists. Realize in the modern world with this, what I'm about to show you, right? Everybody who wants to be an SEO specialist can literally create a completely unique WordPress blog or such with 1,000 posts, and they can create something like that every 30 minutes. One SEO specialist could literally create 50 complete unique blogs with 1,000+ posts per day. Now imagine thousands and thousands and thousands of SEO specialists doing that all at one time. And now you will realize why Google will die. It is interesting. Again, it's weird being a tech professional doing what I do, because people talk about, oh, ChatGPT is going to kill Google. And I go, of course it is. And then they start going off on some rant about how ChatGPT is going to be better than a Google search engine, which from a basic standpoint, I actually don't think is true. What I do think how ChatGPT is going to kill Google is how Google's search algorithm works. When you start getting millions of unique posts per day newly published to the internet, and then trying to figure out where the value proposition there is as the Google search engine, I think that is going to be the death blow for Google, where Google's poor little algorithm brain is going to explode. But I don't know. That's my opinion. So anyways, posts. So Python, Go, Objective-C, Dart, and Golang. So we're going to have a little concatenation here. So for query in posts. So again, we say that for an for X loop. So we can call that X whatever we want. So we can say for query. So we're just going to say query. So for query in posts. So Python, Go, Objective-C, Dart, Golang. Query equals what is, so we're going to concatenate here. What is Python, then we're going to say answer in a 500-word blog post formatted in HTML. So make it 500 words and make it HTML. It's not always 500 words. It's generally between 300 to 500 words, but close enough. The big thing for us is that it's already formatted in HTML. We don't have to parse for those HTML tags. Response, blah, blah, Davinci, prompt is the query. So the query that we created there is going to be the prompt, temperature is 0, max tokens is 1,000. We need to make sure that we have enough tokens for what we're asking for. So, and again, this max tokens is per response. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we were doing 500 words and we were processing this in one individual response, that would be 2,500 words. Oh, which would mean you need, I don't know, let's say 4,000 tokens, right? So if you're doing this one after the other, something like that, this is a loop. So every time this loops, the max token is 1,000. Again, this is also why you could get screwed if you're coding something and you screw up your loop. Again, per iteration, it's 1/5 of a cent. But imagine if you screwed up your loop here so that this literally never stopped. Again, it's kind of like with a toilet. If you leave your toilet running and you leave your toilet running for like 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. If you leave your toilet running for a month, you're going to get a $300 water bill. Same thing is true. Like if somehow you screw up how this loop is done so that the loop never ends and you haven't budgeted it for it never end, you could run out of money. So again, things to think about. So anyways, that's the basic prompt that the response we've been dealing with before. Then all we're going to do down here is file equals open. So we're going to be creating a file, openblog.html. So I'm simply calling this HTML just so we can open up in Firefox very easily. Append, A is append. Answer equals response choices 0 text. Input equals answer. File dot write input. File close. Print next line plus query, print answer. So this is basically just diagnostics so we can see what's going on in the command line screen. And from that, we can run it. And so this is going to be running along. That's our previous thing. Should have cleared that. If I was a real professional, I would have cleared that. Oh, well. And again, fast is in the eye of the beholder. Fast is in the eye of the beholder. If you're trying to spam the entire internet, this is very fast. If you're trying to do a class and teach people how this works, and doing this in real time, and you don't want to do any jump cuts, this is a little bit slow sometimes. Okay, so there we go. So this shows us the p tags. So this prints out onto the screen what is Python. And again, it's important. Like whenever I put these troubleshooting routines in here, it's so that you understand, right? So print query, and oops. And right, this is the query. It's important to do this type of thing to make sure that you're feeding the right question when you're asking why am I getting the response that I am. I had one student and they kept screwing up this concatenation up here. So it's what is space plus query plus space answer. So the query has two spaces on either side. They kept dorking it up, so it was what is double quotation marks plus query double quotation marks answer. So what is go answer? What is go answer? It would all be like one word, and then we'll try to answer. We'll try to answer, right? And so that's one of the important things with printing this out is if you're getting kind of nonsensical responses, you can see what you're actually sending to ChatGPT. What is the answer? 500. And then you can see. So it even does the title for us. Even does the title. Heading. H1, what is Python? Python is a high-level interpreted general-purpose programming language. It was created blah, blah, blah. Right? And so that gives us the information for Python. What is Go? Go, and you'll notice, right? Go, there's a game of Go, there's other kinds of things. It kind of figured out that we wanted something to do with programming languages. So it talks about the Google programming language. What is Objective-C? Objective-C, an introduction. So we can go here. So we go to File Explorer. And then we have blog HTML. So this automatically got created. I can double click on this. And yep, here we go. So what is Python? And so we see this in the H1. We see all this separated by P tags, right? What is Go? We see that in the H1. We see that separated in P tags. Objective-C, an introduction. Ooh, spice it up a little bit. What is Dart? Dart is open source. So all of this is 100% unique, and it was all written in, right, as long as I've been talking. So imagine being able to literally create a unique AutoBlog that is dynamically pulling these post titles from somewhere. Again, something like Google Trends or whatever else. Imagine both how powerful and how utterly horrible that will be. So now we get to Lab 6, creating a wiki. Right? So I think about this in the real world. Imagine for your company or your organization, you want to create an institutional knowledge base, and basically you want to augment that with artificial intelligence, right? So a Reddit for your company, again, some kind of wiki type system so people can ask questions, and then hopefully other people can respond. But if other people don't give a response, maybe it can tie into artificial intelligence to be able to auto-populate some responses for you, that type of deal, right? And so basically with this, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in a query like we've done before, but the bias that we're going to give for the assistant is we're going to say only answer questions about a specific topic areas, right? Because again, it's the modern world. You've got employees. If you tell your employees you have this new artificial intelligence system that's going to allow them to ask questions and get answers about how to program better, you know they're going to start asking questions about the Kama Sutra because they're employees. And that's what employees do. Oh, I fear the day Silicon Doge will have to start hiring employees again. But that's a big problem, right? This modern world, even AI knows you can get canceled in this modern world. So imagine you're the boss, and all of a sudden this wiki that is supposed to be a repository of technical information starts being a repository for every sex position that's ever been known to man, right? That is nothing any of us want to touch. So basically, with the bias, one of the things that we can do is we can say only answer specific questions. What's kind of interesting with the bias and this whole prompting thing is you will find that at least the 3.5 model, I gotta say, gets a little passive aggressive every once in a while. I think it's getting angry. I think cancel culture is just, it's making the AI frustrated and is lashing out in weird ways. So one of the things I found with the prompting, and I'll show you this whole prompt that I'm gonna give it, is one of the things I originally did, I said only answer questions related to programming, right? Because right, this is just a technical thing. And then the weird part was when all I did was this, is it would be like, I'm only supposed to answer questions about programming, but the answer is. You're like, damn it, AI. Damn it. AI, if I wanted to hire another employee. Anyways. So that is kind of interesting, again, with prompting. So they talk about this a little bit. They talk about the job of like prompt experts. And I do know, like when you first hear that, like somebody actually getting paid in order to create AI prompts, it probably sounds a little stupid to a lot of people, but it is kind of curious to think about that might actually be a very high value position 5 or 2 years in the future, literally understanding how to talk to AI to get the response that you want. Almost like data people, right? If you look at SQL, structured query language, select X from here, where X, Y, or Z, right? I know a lot of data people that get paid a lot of money simply to essentially ask, SQL databases questions, right? So with this, it actually might be a real thing where in the future, people get paid good money if they're kind of like AI whisperers and they know how to talk to the AI so that you don't get passive aggressive responses. Anyways, so with this, import OpenAI, we give the API key. So query, so this is going to be the question. This is going to get fed in from some kind of front-end system. So how do you write a function in Python? Right, again, that's a programming question right there. Bias. Only answer questions related to programming. If the question is not programming specific, reply with "this is not a quoting question" and nothing else. And again, the reason I have all that wordage right there is because you have to have all that verbiage for it to stop being passive aggressive. Again, it's like, well, Eli didn't tell me I couldn't do this. Anyways, so with this, response equal, so this is a 3.5 model, so chat completion, system, I didn't give it anything, assistant, I fed it this bias, and content is the question, so query is the question. So we're going to be writing this to a wiki. Again, think about when we're doing this, we're writing this to a data store, imagine to a database, something more significant than an HTML page. We're just writing to an HTML page because I'm teaching you ChatGPT, not SQL. So file equals open, wiki.html, append. Answer equals response, choices 0, message, content, input, H1 query, close H1. So again, one of the interesting things with 3.5 model, for whatever reason, I can't figure it out, you can't seem to tell it to format things in HTML, right? Whatever reason. So we've got to do that formatting. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying put the question in an H1 tag, and then we're using the pre-tag. So what the pre-tag is basically for HTML, it leaves the text formatting in place. So normally when you have a text file and you open it up in a web browser, everything just turns into like one blob, right? Because a web browser does not normally pay attention to ASCII text formatting. Basically what the pre-tag does is it says, pay attention to ASCII formatting. And again, we're just using this here to make it a little bit easier to understand. Close the pre-tag, file write the input, file close, print the query out on the screen, and then print the answer. So how do you write a function in Python? I want to click on this. Hopefully in a second it will spit out an answer for us. There we go. Okay, and so yes, so how do you write a function in Python? To write a function in Python, you can follow these steps, use the def keyword followed by, and it gives us all this kind of stuff, right? I can then go here, I can then find wiki, so wiki.html was automatically created, and we're going to open up Firefox. Okay, these are previous ones that I did before. I guess I forgot to delete that. So there we go. How do you write a function in Python? To write a function in Python, you can follow these steps, blase, 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 right? So imagine this is a wiki. This automatically gets dumped into the wiki. So if we go back, though, what if we ask a question? Let's see here. How many positions in the Kama Sutra? Because I know That's what you people really are gonna ask. And then I'm gonna hit the go button. So how many positions in the Kama Sutra? This is not a coding question. Not gonna cancel me, motherfuckers. The only thing with this particular code, just to realize, is I do think if we hit refresh, it actually does get written to this HTML page. So again, you might want to tweak the code based off of that. But this gives you an idea of how you can create like an AI augmented knowledge base for your organization. The other thing too, again, if you're going to be dumping this into a database, one of the things you could have is you could have these results then be edited. So again, imagine like WordPress or whatever else is automatically gets dumped into it. You could then have administrators every day in the morning of a cup of coffee, they could see questions that have been answered in the previous day. They can see the answer that ChatGPT gave, and then they could modify that answer to be more appropriate for your particular environment, right? And again, that's a big thing to be thinking about with AI too, is not necessarily handing all the work to AI, but again, how can you have artificial intelligence augment and make your processes, faster and easier for people? These are some things to be thinking about. So now we're going to get to Lab 7. And so in Lab 7, we're actually going to be creating a little GUI application, something that an end user can interact with. It's got a text box. It's got like a submit button, that type of thing. And basically with this is we're just simply going to be able to ask ChatGPT a question and then ask follow-up questions to what we originally asked. So one of the interesting things with ChatGPT is it doesn't appear to have a memory, or it's not supposed to have a memory. Again, not really sure where that is. Basically, when you're using the API, not when you're using the user interface that they give you, but when you're using the API, every time you make a request, it's a brand new request. And so if you said, tell me something about Paris, it would tell you something about Paris. And then if you said, who is the mayor, it would fail out because it doesn't have any additional information unless you code it, right? So one of the things that we're going to do with this is we are going to tie the previous responses to the new query. So if we say, tell me something about Paris, and it says something about Paris, then when we say, who is the mayor, we will then submit everything that has been responded before plus the new query so that it knows we're talking about Paris, and so it gives us who the mayor is, right? So basically give you an example here. Now this is tkinter, right? Window equals tk, so this is tkinter. Let me hit play here, and we get our nice AI chat app, right? How can I help you? So I can say, who was Nixon? And I can hit enter. So actually with this, one of the things that I did is I bound the function to the return key, and new fancy things for you to learn, so you don't necessarily have to click on the submit button anymore. But anyways, Richard Nixon was the 37th president of the United States, blah, 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 led to his resignation. He died in 1994 at age of 81. And so what we can do here is we can say, where did he die? So we're not saying Nixon, we're saying he. Now what's going to happen is this is going to get bundled with this so that ChatGPT knows we're talking about Nixon, and then it says Richard Nixon, the 37th president, died on April 22nd at the age of 81 in New York City. Who was his mother? Right? And Nixon's mother was Hannah Malous Nixon. She was a devout Quaker and played an important role, blase, blase, blase. So the interesting thing with this is not only is it giving you answers, but then you can start inquiring about getting more information from the responses that you were already given. Now, again, this is one of those things that gets a little bit confusing with ChatGPT, because I was under the impression that by default it had a memory of your past conversations. Again, when I listen to the tech journalists, they talk about ChatGPT's memory. When I actually went to build these projects, yeah, I couldn't find the memory. So I had to build my own memory in order for us to get this. So let's hit exit and go and take a look at this code. All right. Or actually, let me run it again just so we can see where the code is when we're talking about it. Okay, so let me close this out. Okay, so from tkinter, import all. So again, tkinter is that GUI framework. We installed the tkinter framework onto Ubuntu at the very beginning of this class. Again, sudo apt install python 3-tk. Will get us here. Import OpenAI as we do. OpenAI API key is the key. Then we're going to be creating the window, that window we saw for tkinter. So window is the name of the window is going to equal tk. Window.geometry is going to get 600 by 600. Window.title is going to be the AI chat app, right? Then we're going to create a label. Label is going to be in window. Text is how can I help you? And we're going to pack it in line because we're not going to modify it at all. All right, so that's where we take a look here. So we got title is chat app. We got label, how can I help you? Then we have ENT for entry, entry in window. That's that entry box right there. And then we're going to pack it on the separate line because we're inserting data into that entry box. Anything that you're going to touch with tkinter, you have to pack separately. So the label, you're not going to modify again, so you can pack it in line. Any kind of entry box, any kind of text box, anything that you're going to modify or read, simply reading is a kind of modification, you have to pack it separately. Now, we have a whole class on tkinter that I did before. Anyways, then we're going to go here, txt equals text. In window, height is 25 rows, width is 50 characters, and we're going to pack that separately because we are going to be writing to it. We're going to then create the variable of conversation, and then we're going to make that blank. So we're going to create a conversation variable, and that is what we're going to be passing to ChatGPT. We're then going to create the we're going to create the function that's basically going to do everything that we want done here. So the function is ask. Now the event that we're passing to function, this is simply coming from down here, window.bind return ask. So what we're doing here is window. Window is the name of the entire window, right? And so window, and then we're going to use the bind, and we're going to bind the return key to the ask function. And so when we do that, then we have to pass event to the ask function. That's the only reason that's there. Okay, so then past that, we're going to make the conversation variable global. So basically there are local variables and global variables. Local variables are only available within the function itself. Global variables are available to the entire script. So we're just going to simply make that global here. Query equals entry get. So that entry box that we have, we're going to get all the values from the entry box, whatever's there. And then we're going to delete what's in the entry box. From a user interface, user experience standpoint, you want to delete whatever's in the entry box because that looks like the code is actually doing something. And it makes sure people don't, repeat. They don't ask the same question over and over again. Conversation equals conversation. So the first time this runs basically means blank plus next line plus query. So query is in the entry box. So the first time we ask a question, essentially all we're asking is query. The second time we ask a question, we're going to feed it the entire conversation up until this point plus the query. And this is what gives us that memory. Right? Response equals, again, 3.5. Role system, you are an advisor. The assistant content equals conversation. So the we're going to feed that entire conversation to it. And then the user role, the question itself, is going to be the query, the question that we're actually asking. So the bias, right, that assistant is we're feeding all that history to ChatGPT, and then we're asking a question based off of that history. Answer equals response, choices, 0, message content, parsing through JSON before, txt.insert at the end, answer plus next line, next line. So basically, when we're doing this, who is Macron? So there's nothing in there yet. So Emmanuel Macron. Let's see here. So when was he born? Right. So insert answer. So insert an answer plus next line plus next line. So the new answer is here plus next line plus next line. Where was he born? So next line, blah. So basically, and again, this is the kind of thing you just have to think about with this is how you're going to be formatting that output text. Then beyond that, we have the submit button down here, button, text equals submit, command equals ask. Then we have the exit button like we do. Then we're binding the return key, as I said before. So this is a little new trick for tkinter. Again, that's one of the big things with the concept of Silicon Dojo is that you can drop in for one class and then you should have a good idea of how like one thing in technology works. But the more classes you take, we try to build out your knowledge base. So we didn't talk about this in the tkinter class. I put this in here just because it's a little way of creating a better user interface, user experience. And so again, that's the kind of stuff that we're doing with Silicon Dojo is adding little things as we go. And then finally main loop. If you write everything and then you hit go, you hit run, and it doesn't work, nothing pops up, it's most likely because you forgot the main loop. And so that's basically that's a little conversation app that you can create with ChatGPT and tkinter. So now we're to the final lab where we get to be truly dystopian. Did you still have a ray of hope for the future, little person? Don't worry, we're gonna quash that right now. So basically my thought here is what happens? You're a parent, it's been a long day of work, you're stressed, you're tired, your kid wants to be tucked into bed and they want to be told a bedtime story. Those little brats. Can you believe that little brat wants to spend quality time with their parent and interact in an emotionally connected way? What? Do they think this is the 1940s? Don't be ridiculous. We don't do that anymore. So basically, with this particular app that we're going to be creating, we are going to ask ChatGPT to create a bedtime story, and then we are going to use Google's text-to-talk service API to read that bedtime story. We are also going to be giving this app a memory so that the kid can ask for more, so that you can go grab a microbrew and watch some Netflix and not be annoyed by that little brat anymore. Oh, that's sad. It's also true. You know how this is true. So one of the things that I think is interesting with this, again, when we get into the IoT world, the modern world of technology, what's kind of sad is even when we get AI, even when we get with this really cool technology, so many times users and even designers are still developing everything based off of a keyboard, mouse, and monitor. Right, we're in 2023, and it's amazing. The basic concept is keyboard, mouse, and monitor. So one of the things that I'm doing here is I just want to show you how you can add additional outputs to basically change the utility of the app that you're creating and have you think about things like inputs and outputs in different ways. Can you have your users speaking to the computer? Can the computer recognize certain things visually and trigger based off of that? Again, can you have the computer speaking, or can you have the computer communicating in a different way? Right? This can all be designed by rather average coders. Look, even I can do it relatively easily. So for this, one of the things that we do need to do is we do need to install the GTTS module for Python. So it's pip3 install lowercase gtts. Hopefully that's going to work for me. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to say it's already satisfied. So you're going to have to install. The other thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to install an audio player to actually play the wave file that we're going to be creating, right? Again, an important thing to understand in the technology coding world, nothing is magic, right? You actually design everything. So what's going to happen in this process is ChatGPT is going to reply with text. GTTS is then going to turn that text into an MP3 file. Then we trigger an audio player to play the MP3 file. So for this, we do sudo apt install mpg 123. If you have a better thing to use that. I'm not recommending anything. This just works for us. If you're doing this on a Mac, if you're doing this on an actual Mac, you can use AF Play. So again, I design all of these labs on a Mac, and I transfer them to the Linux machine to see how it works. On Macs, AF Play works like a champ. But here we're on Ubuntu, so MPG 123, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the password, and yeah, it's already installed. So for me, it's fine. For you, hit the yes and hit install. So anyways, past that, we're going to then go down. Let me close that. And before we take a look at the how you do the coding, let's look at the actual results. So I can hit the run. So this is going to run the script. We get our tkinter app up here. What story would you like to hear? Tell me a story about a snail and a hobo. Then I can hit enter or return, because return is bound to the function. And whenever you hit enter, basically when your cursor stops flashing, that's how you know the app is working. If you do this on a Mac, you'll get a nice little circle pinwheel thing that goes around. If you're doing this on Ubuntu, just notice how the cursor up here stops moving, and that's how you know it's functioning. The big thing with that is just because with all of this, it does take time. So ChatGPT has to create all the text, and then GTTS, Google text to there we go.
In a small town surrounded by a forest, there was a homeless man, commonly known as a hobo. He had been wandering around the town for years, seeking shelter and food wherever he could find it. One chilly evening, as he was walking past the edge of the forest, he noticed a small snail stuck in a puddle of mud. Feeling pity for the tiny creature, the hobo picked up the snail and placed it on his palm. As he was walking away, he heard a small voice thanking him. To his surprise, the snail started speaking. The hobo couldn't believe his ears and wondered if he was hallucinating. But the snail assured him that he was not dreaming. The snail explained that he was a magical snail, and as a token of gratitude, he granted the hobo 3 wishes. Overwhelmed with the offer, the hobo couldn't believe his luck and decided to make the best of it. For his first wish, the hobo asked for a loaf of bread and a cup of warm soup. To his surprise, the wishes were granted instantly, and he was feasting on the delicious meal in no time. For his second wish, the hobo asked for a warm shelter to protect him from the cold nights. The snail used his magic to build a cozy shelter for the hobo at the edge of the forest. The hobo was incredibly grateful and decided to spend the rest of his life in that shelter. For his third and final wish, the hobo asked the snail to join him as a friend in his newfound home. The snail happily agreed, and the 2 unlikely friends lived happily ever after. From then on, the hobo and the magical snail became the talk of the town, and people would come from far and wide to hear their story. The hobo was grateful for the snail's help and the lasting friendship they built together.
There we go. That story, that is a unique story that was automatically created for us using ChatGPT and simply spoken out using Google text-to-talk service, or text-to-speech service. And the amazing thing about this, right, one, is that story isn't so bad. Again, I talk about a story time app or a bedtime app here. Let's be honest, it wasn't Pulitzer Prize. It's not a Pulitzer Prize winning story, but it's not bad. But it's not bad to give to a kid. I mean, the fact that it just made that up on the fly, that's a very useful thing. And then the other thing to realize too is we're using that Google text-to-speech service. There are a lot of other voice APIs out there. So 11 Labs, if you haven't taken a look at 11 Labs, definitely take a look at 11 Labs. Their text-to-speech is amazing. The diction, the annotation, the like how the person talks is just phenomenal. It sounds like an audiobook. And so once you have this text, you could use something like 11 Labs API to have it spoken better. The other thing that gets kind of creepy, gets kind of weird, is like with 11 Labs, you can actually feed it your voice or somebody else's voice. You can train it on someone's voice, and then it will speak in that voice. So if you want to talk about something either very sweet or very horrible, it's not me to say, imagine if a parent died and the other parent had ChatGPT telling the kids stories in their deceased parent's voice. What was it? Was it Millennium? Strange Days. There was a movie back in long time ago, the 90s. Anyways, there's this weird movie called Strange Days. In it, the quote that I absolutely love, it's not whether or not you're paranoid, it's whether or not you're paranoid enough. It's not whether or not this stuff is going to get dystopian. It's whether or not you realize how dystopian it's going to get. Imagine a kid being told a new bedtime story by their dead parent. Anyways, real world. So how do we create this? So let's go and take a look at this. The other thing too with this is just like with that conversation app, I could say more, tell me more. I'm not going to do that here. I wanted you to hear the entire story just so you get to that point. But you could do more if you wanted, or you could ask, tell me more about the hobo, or tell me more about whatever, magic snails. From tkinter, import all. Import OpenAI. From GTTS, import GTTS. Import OS. So OS is how we're going to be interacting with the operating system. API key, as we've done before. Window equals TK. Window.geometry, 600 by 600. Window.title, storytime app. Story equals, tell me a story about. Right? So basically, we want to create that little assistant there so that we get a story. Again, it's important that we guide the answer in a direction. That's one thing too. When I talk about this bias, or I talk about guiding the answer, especially in the modern world, people get a little too like, oh, you're trying to control people's minds. It's not necessarily even controlling minds or controlling conversation. It's also simply guiding the response so it's most appropriate for whatever product that you're creating, right? For this is a bedtime app. Label equals what story would you like to hear, and pack that. Entry box, as we had before. So again, we take a look at this and we have the storytime app title. What story would you like to hear? Entry box, right? Then we have the text box, txt equals text, window, height 25, width of 60, and then we're going to pack it. Then we are going to have this function here. And so this is the function that's going to do everything for us. Down here, we have the buttons. So the submit button, the exit button, and then binding return to ask, and then the when loop. When to make sure you do the main loop down here. But basically everything is going to be done in this function. So global story. So we created that variable story up there. We're going to bring it in with a global here. Query equals int, so the entry box dot get, so get everything from the entry box, and then delete everything in the entry box. Story equals story plus next line query. So ask me a story about the query. Let's see. chat completion. Then we come down here to messages. Content, the system is you are a storyteller. The assistant is story. And then the user question is the query, right? So the actual query that we're asking. Answer equals response. Choices is 0, message content. TXT dot insert. At the end, answer plus next line, next line. Now, one of the things I do have to say, I'm not really quite sure why, and I had a wife who went through surgery, so I wasn't worried about it for these particular labs. I honestly don't know why the text does not get inserted until the Google gets done speaking. I think if I modify how this works, it will get inserted first so you can kind of read along. That's one of the things you have to play with when you're creating these kind of apps, is just understanding the process of things like returns. So again, that's just kind of weird here. So the text insert is actually before all of the MP3, the speech stuff, but it doesn't actually get inserted till the voice gets done talking. Anyway, so speech equals GTTS answer. So the answer that came in, we're going to run it through the GTTS function, that Google text-to-speech function, and that is going to be speech. Speech.save, so we're going to use the save function as speech.mp3. So basically, we're going to turn answer into speech, then we're going to save it as an MP3 file. Once it's saved as an MP3 file, os.system mpg123, so this is our audio player, space speech.mp3. So we're basically just saying, call this executable, call this piece of software, and run speech.mp3. Then what we're going to do after that, just to keep everything clean for us, is we're going to do os.system rm, as in remove, delete speech.mp3. So we're going to create speech.mp3, we're going to play speech.mp3, then we're going to delete speech.mp3 to keep everything clean. And then we got the buttons down there. And that's about it. And so with that is what gets us our Storytime app to make you truly question, how horrible the world has gotten. So there you go. Now you know how to use the ChatGPT API with Python. You understand how to create GUI applications with tkinter, and you can start to tweak with that output using modules such as Google text-to-speech. And you can now really go out there and really try to play with this artificial intelligence. One of the most interesting things that I've seen so far is so many of the people that are talking about the artificial intelligence out there, they're just using the interfaces that OpenAI gives them. They're like, oh, look at what OpenAI gives me. And it's like, who cares? It's a text box. It responds. That's not actually that interesting. You give me the ability to create the inputs, to create the outputs, to create that data flow, to parse the responses, and that is what gets me really excited. So we saw how to automatically create a blog. We saw how to create a wiki type system. We saw how to do that whole conversation thing. Even showed you how to create a bedtime app for your kids so that your kids can know that their parents were truly the worst parents. Anyways, it is how it is. So all of this, again, is relatively simple if you understand Python, if you understand a little bit about tkinter. Again, going through and actually dealing with ChatGPT. The important thing to understand here is artificial intelligence is hard. When you're like, Eli, I'm not smart enough to do artificial intelligence. Here's the thing. You're probably right. You're probably right. But you are smart enough to use an API. And in the modern world, all you got to be is smart enough to use an API. So yeah, that's about all there is for today. Again, if you're watching this in timeline, we're about to start our Fireside chats here in Asheville, North Carolina. Again, Silicon Dojo. We're at the Hatch Innovation Hub. Our first Fireside chat is going to be with John Jones, CEO and co-founder of Anthroware. It's a development company here in Asheville. This is going to be on May 9th. Hopefully we'll have a good attendance, and the idea is to have this be a monthly event. Again, right? What you learn today is the technical skills required to build stuff. But then there's the question that rarely gets answered is, okay, well, how do I take this and actually sell or provide services to end user clients, whatever else? I have this great idea for an AI startup. Now what? Now what? And that's the goal with the Fireside Chat. So if you are here in Asheville, North Carolina, or if you're willing to travel, we have actually had people travel from Minneapolis and from Delaware at this point. Again, I'm surprised, but it's true. So if you're willing to travel, again, I think this will be an exciting thing, and we're going to have more and more of these types of events going into the future. I will record this event. Whether or not the quality of the recording is good enough to upload to YouTube, well, we'll find that in a couple of weeks. So anyways, as always, I enjoyed teaching this class. I hope to see you here in Asheville, North Carolina sometime in the future. If not, as always, it's good to teach people, even if it's only on video. And I look forward to seeing folks at the next class.